Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use if and if else statements in Python. So before we get started, just a little intro into if statements. So if statements will allow you to see or run some code if a condition is true. So if a condition is false, then you will not see any code execute. However, if the condition you place in the if statement is true, then it will execute any code that is under that if statement. So let's take a look at that. So first, the if statement looks like this. So it would say if, and then you would put the condition inside of parentheses. Now, the parentheses is not necessary, but I just personally like to use it so I know what my condition is and it's not combined all in one line of code together. That way it's just easier for me to see exactly what I'm testing because that will be within the parentheses. So if I were to come here and do the if statement, then I could say if let's say 1 is less than 2, then we want to print 1 is less than 2. So that would pretty much check to see if 1 is less than 2. And if 1 is less than 2, we should see 1 is less than 2 printed to the screen. So if we click run, we will see what happens. And there you go. 1 is less than 2. So being that we are looking at 1 is less than 2, that means the condition that we checked is true. So if the condition we were checking was false, then we should see nothing. So let's test a false condition. And let's say if 2 is less than 1, we could print 2 is less than 1. Or actually, let's just say this number is less than 1. All right, and we'll run that. So if we were to run this, basically we will see this line print out if the condition is true, if this condition is true. So if we click run, then you see that the condition does not come out. Being that the condition is false, you will not see anything happen. So with if statements, it's only going to print out if the condition is true. So for this case, that is when the else statement will come into play. So an else statement is used or will execute when the if statement condition is false. Basically, it will give you some sort of output letting you know that that if statement is not true, and it's like a fail all. So if the condition is not true, then this. So an else statement is just pretty much going to print out anything you want it to say. To create an else statement, it will look exactly like this. Else followed by the colon. Then you click enter and then you type whatever statement you would like to use in that if else statement. So we'll put here print the condition is false. So I'll change this one to the condition is true and run. And then you see that we get the condition is false. So your else is going to execute if the if condition is not true. So that's basically why people use the if else statement. It's pretty much testing one condition to see if it's true, and if it's true, it will execute some sort of code. If it's not true, you can utilize the else statement, which will pretty much notify the user that the condition is not false or is false, and it will allow the user to see another output rather than the one in the if statement. So now that we kind of get an understanding of that, let's test it out a little bit more. So let's get into just creating a number. So num equals 100. So we could say if 19 is less than num, then we are going to print 19, or this number is less than num. So click run, and then you see this number is less than num. So to do another example, we can also use strings. So you don't have to only use numbers, you can use strings. So we could say color equals red. Then we can do if color is equal to blue, then we're going to say print the sky is blue. Now we could say else print I like the rainbow, just to put something in there. And if we click run, you see that it will print to us that I like the rainbow, because our if condition was saying if the color is equal to blue, then you want to print out the sky is blue. But being that the color is red, it did not print out that statement. Now, if we were to change this to blue, then you see it will print out the sky is blue. So the if statement in this case, the condition would be true, and that is why we're seeing a different response. So let's say you want to test multiple options. That's when the elif statement will come into play. So you have the if, elif, else statement. The elif will allow you to test various conditions within the if, else statement. So if we were to use the same example, then you will notice that you can test various conditions. So I'll start a new block of code for that. So we'll stick to the color. So we'll say color equals red. I'll say, actually, let's do color 1. We'll do color 2 is equal to blue. And color 3 is equal to green. Now we have 3 different colors. So let's use the if, elif, else statement. So first you would test one condition. So if condition 1, and in this case we'll say if, let's say color 1 is equal to, let's say green, then we are going to print that color 1 is green. So that will be the first case. Now, like I said, we have 3 different colors. So what happens if we want to test all 3 colors to see what those colors are? Then you can use the elif statement. So an elif statement is like this. Elif, E-L-I-F. And then you would do similar to your if statement, and you can do another condition. Now, we already checked if color 1 is equal to green, so we'll do color 2 is equal to, let's say, orange. Then we can print that color 2 is orange. So that's now another condition. So our first condition is checking to see if color 1 is equal to green. And our second condition is checking to see if color 2 is equal to orange. But as I said, we have more colors. So if you wanted to test out different colors, then you can just do multiple Elif statements. So Elif color 2 is equal to, let's say this one is equal to blue. Then we could say print color, forgot the string, color 2 is blue. So let's have our fail all case or our else case where we say else print none of the conditions match. Or let's say none of the conditions are true. So now when we click run, it will give us back the print statement that is equivalent to the condition that is true. And in that case, it is the one that says color 2 is blue, which would be this statement here. So in this example, basically what happens is your code is going to execute and it's going to run down your if-elif statements until it finds the first true condition. If it does not find any true conditions, it will execute the else statement. So if I were to put here, let's say for this example, and if you're curious, up here is where we said color is equal to blue, so it just kind of remembered that from my code above. So that is where it's getting it from. So if you're confused as to why color 2 is not here, that's because color, if you hover over it, it says blue because color I created up here in the previous example. But just to help you guys see it in case that may be confusing, I'll do color 2 so we can stay on the same piece of code. And there you go. So either way it went, you see we still get the same print statement. So it doesn't matter which variable you use in the case, as long as it's true, it will print out. So in this case, we tested various different colors, and your if statement is basically going to execute until it finds the first true condition. Now, if that condition is not true, then the else statement will execute. So if we were to make this false, and let's change this to black, and click run, then you see it printed out none of the conditions are true, because that is the truth. None of the conditions are true. So that is how you would use the if-elif statements. You can have as many elif statements as you want, as long as it remains between an if and an else statement. They should not be outside of the else statement. So you should never have, for example, you should never do something like this. So if you put it here, you can already see we get that red squiggly line, but I'll keep going. And if you click run, then you're going to get an error and it's pointing to the elif. It's saying that this is not correct. It's invalid syntax. It is invalid syntax because a elif statement has to be within the if and the else. So it has to go between it. So if I were to cut this out, then you see the error is now gone, and I could place it here on this next line, and then click run, and then you see that the error is now gone. So just make sure that you are doing it in the correct position. Now, another way you can do this is you don't necessarily have to have a else statement, but the else statement is there in case all of your conditions are false. So it kind of lets your user know that yes, it checked what it was asking for, but nothing matched what they were checking. It's just a way to tell them that the code ran and it didn't meet its requirements. So the else statement is just really helpful because it's going to print something to the user rather than nothing to the user. So imagine running your code and all your conditions are false, then nothing's going to happen, and that may confuse the user of your code. They may think that the code's broken or nothing happened when in reality it did. To show you an example of this, I can take this line out and then we'll see what happens. So you see, nothing prints out. So to you, you're like, hey, I know I checked stuff, but I don't see anything. I think something's wrong with my code. That does not necessarily mean anything is wrong with your code. That is why the else statement is kind of a necessity. Not saying that you really need it, but it just shows something to your user in case all of the conditions are false. So if you put it back, then you should then see that the print statement is going to execute and it will show something to your user. So that is how you would use the if, elif, else statement. Now, just to get a little deeper into it, we can also utilize this with input. So let's say you want to use input and we can check a number that a user enters. So we can say right here, number is equal to int input, and we can say enter a number. So this will hold a number, and basically we can check to see if that number is equal to another number. So if, and I'll show this example without parentheses, if number is equal to 10, we could print the number is 10. We can check it again, elif, and now we'll use operational or operations to check. So elif, the number is less than 10. We're going to print the number is less than 10. And a logical operator, you can also use that. So elif, let's say the number is less than 10 and number is less than 20. Then you want to print the number is between 10 and 20. So basically, what's happening in this line right here is it's going to check two conditions at one time within one elif statement, which you can do. So basically, this is going to be your first condition here. If the number is less than 10 and if that number is less than 20, then you would print this statement. So it is combining two conditions into one statement. And for this to run, both of those conditions have to be true. And that is how the AND operator works. For it to execute, both of those conditions have to be true. But let's say we want to check if one of those conditions is true. That's when you can use the OR operator. And you can say elif number is less than 10 or number is less than 20, which we know either that case is going to be true. So we'll put this greater than 20. Then you can say print this Elif statement is true. Actually, in this case, I'm going to make it equal to a number. So let's say equal to 20. So it's going to check both of these conditions, as I stated. So it's going to check if the number is less than 10, and it's going to check if the number is equal to 20. So basically, with the or, if one of the conditions is true, so if this condition is true, or if this condition is true, then this statement will execute. So that will be an example of that. And then we can put our else statement just for our fail off. Print none of the conditions are true. And now let's run that. So it tells us to enter a number, and we'll say 23. And then it says none of the conditions are true. So if we go back and look at our code, we'll see why we got this response. Our first condition here is saying if number is equal to 10. And as we hover over, it says number is equal to 23. So basically what happens is your computer reads it as if 23 is equal to 10, then you want to print this. Being that 23 is not equal to 10, then it skips this whole line of section of code right here. So it's just going to skip this and go right to your next condition that you're checking. So now it's going to check else if the number 23 is less than 10, then it will print this statement here. Now, being that it is not less than 10, it's going to skip this print statement and go to your next condition check or your next Elif statement. So now it's going to check if number is less than 10 and if the number is less than 20. Then it will print out this statement. And being that number is 23, again, that is not a true condition for us. So it will ignore this line of code. And it comes to this line of code and it checks if number is less than 10 or if number is equal to 20, then it will say this Elif statement is true. But like I said, it's still not true. So skip this, and that is why we are getting this printed out. Now, if we were to run this again and fit it within one of these conditions we already have existing, then we can say 10, and you'll see that the number is 10 will print out. Line 3, the number 10 will print out. If you do it again, let's try to check for this case. So if the number is less than 10, so we'll put 6, then you see that the number is less than 10 prints out. Let's check this condition right here. So we want a number between 10 and 20. So let's do 15. And you see here that it says none of the conditions are true. Because of this, 15 is not less than 10, so this does not execute. Because remember, with the and, this condition has to be true, and this condition has to be true. So being that 15 is not less than 10, this makes this condition false, which means that this does not execute, and it goes here. This condition right here, or this Elif statement right here, is not true. It skips that and goes to our else. So if we were to run this again, remember it says Elif number is less than 10, so we would have to put another number. But in this case, it's not going to ever print out that condition because we already have a condition above it that will be true first. And remember what I said, basically it's going to execute each if Elif condition one at a time, and the first one that it hits that is true is the one it's going to execute. So this line right here will never happen because we are testing the same condition here. So if that's the case, it will satisfy this condition before it ever gets to this condition. So although 9 is less than 10, it never reaches this Elif condition because it stops at this one. It stops at the first true statement. So if we wanted to test this one, we could change this to 15. And let's just say equal. So if the number is less than or equal to 15, then we're going to run that. So we'll say 15. And then you see now that condition prints out because the number was 15. So in that case, you will see that statement come out. Now in this case, let's run it again. We'll do 20. And now you see it prints out this Elif statement is true. Because this one does not print if it is equal to 20, it prints if the number is less than 20. But this one prints if the number is equal to 20. So that's why this statement comes out. So this is how you use the if-elif statements as well as your else statements. There's various ways you can use them, and there's various things you can test, but it will be up to you which you're testing and how you test them. But the key takeaway from this is, first, if you want to test one condition, you would just use the if statement, and I would recommend using an else statement just in case that if statement condition is false. So if you're testing one condition, you can simply use the if-else statement. However, if you want to test multiple conditions at one time, then you use the if, elif, else statement. And remember, you can have as many elif statements as you want. You can have 1 or you can have 2 million. There's no set amount of elif statements you should have, but that is how you could use the if, else, elif statements. Now, there is one other technique you could use, and we call that the nested if statement. So, a nested if statement is basically a if statement inside of if statement. So, you could test if a number is equal to 5 and if the number is less than 2 or something like that to test multiple conditions inside of a condition. So, in this case, we'll say, let's do the number example again. So in this case, we're not going to ask a user to enter a number just to save time. So we'll just put in a number and we'll do the nested if. So in this case, let's say if num is less than 20, we are going to print that num is less than 20. Now, let's test another condition. Elif num is, we'll say, greater than 20. Greater than 20, then we are going to print num is greater than 20. Now that we have that, if we click run, then you see it printed to us num is greater than 20. But let's say we want to get down to narrow exactly what that number is or the range of that number. So you could have a if statement in a if statement. So we could say if num is, so we're already checking in this statement if num is greater than 20. So we could say if num is less than 30, then we could say print the number is less than 30. And then we'll check another statement. So elif num is less than or equal to 25. We could print the number is less than or equal to 25. And let's hit run here. And then you see that it prints out 1. First, it prints out num is greater than 20. So it prints out this statement here, but once it is inside, it also will then check these lines of code and print out anything or any condition within the nested if statements that are true directly after it. So this line of code happens first, so this will execute first. So this is printing out first, and then your code will continue to check each line and continue to execute whatever is stated under it. So being that it then checks this, if num is less than 30, then you want to print the number is less than 30, then that will print it out. This does not happen because the number is less than 30 first, so that is why it is not happening. So in here, we could say if the number is greater than 30 and click run, then you should see that none of those are basically going to happen because the number is not greater than 30. And this is checking if the number is less than or equal to 25. So if we wanted to do another Elif case, we could say Elif num is, let's say, greater than 25 and num is less than 30. Then you can print the number is between 25 and 30, or we'll say 24. Less than. So in here at the num, we're basically saying num is greater than 25. So that will be the number is between 25 or 26 and 30. Actually, it would be 29. Because we're saying it's less than 30, we would have to put an equal sign. And there you go. So 28 is between 25 and 30, so it printed out this. So technically, yes, you can continue to nest. Would you want to? Not necessarily, but we could in this case. So I could do an if statement if we could say num is equal to 27. We could say print the number is 27. Then you could say Elif number is equal to 28. We could say print the number is 28. And click run, and then you see that it first printed out this first statement. So it printed out this, line 6. So like I said, our number is 28. So it checked here. So if 28 is less than 20, then print this. And that's not the case. Then it goes to the Elif statement. So else if the num is greater than 20, which it is, because we have 28, it then printed out num is greater than 20. And then it checked this if statement, which is saying if 28 is greater than 30, which it is not, then it's going to print this. So it skips line 9, then it goes to line 10, and it says else if 28 is less than or equal to 25, which is not true. It skips line 11, goes to line 12. Else if 28 is greater than 25 and 28 is less than 30, which is true, both of these are true, then it will print out that the number is between 26 and 29, which is what we got in our output down here. And then it checks the if statements inside of that else if statement. So these if statements, or this if and else if statement, are under this elif statement. It is going to check if the number is equal to 27, then it's going to print this, so it's not. And then it checked if 28 is equal to 28, or if num is equal to 28, which it is, and that is why we get 3 outputs to the console. So that is how you would use a nested if statement. And that is how you can check multiple conditions within one condition. So this has been a tutorial with Python if statements and the things you can do with them. And hopefully this was helpful in some way. As I stated before, there are multiple ways that you can use if-elif statements. You just kind of have to be creative with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to check, but the possibilities are endless, and that's totally up to you how you get creative using the if-elif else statements. So, thank you for tuning into this video. Hopefully you learned something very helpful, and I'll see you next time.